neighborhood development concepts for an infill area. South Side, have to get rid of that little window. South Side received national awards from the US EPA, from the American Planning Association, and the Sierra Club. Sue also served as president of the American Institute of Certified Planners and is a member of the AICP College of Fellows. That's the standard introduction. That's the legitimate one. But beyond that, Sue is probably one of the most approachable people in the city of Greensboro government. If you have a question or a concern, you can get in touch with her and she will be back in touch with you. She's also a heck of a lot of fun to have lunch with. So our topic, Sue was a TEDx Greensboro speaker in 2022, and her YouTube video is online.
It is?
Yeah, went up a couple of days ago, and I'm putting that link to that in the chat. And we're going to talk about all kinds of things about housing and try answer the question, why isn't there enough affordable housing in Greensboro? So I'm going to be quiet, and Sue, it's all yours.
Well, good evening, everybody. Well, we're going to talk about a couple of aspects of housing in Greensboro and kind of what's been going on with the city. Bob was on a commission about 15 years ago now that I staffed, and we were catching up, and he asked me what I was doing, and I just said, I'm just really busy. And then part of that, because things that we have wanted for a long time, Greensboro's economy kind of was a snail's pace there for a while, are suddenly all coming together. So I'm going to talk about that. Let me hit the share screen. Oops. Actually, Liz, if you can let me, it says hostess disabled.
I just asked Liz to make you a co-host. I saw that.
Okay. Okay. I think we got it. Whoops, come back. Okay, are you seeing that? You see the PowerPoint? Yes, no?
No.
So.
Did you click share screen?
I did, but let me go back and do it again.
Yeah, sometimes you gotta smack it.
Okay. Share screen. There we go.
There we go.
Okay. Okay. Let me put it into screen. All right. Okay, we've been doing this for how many years now? But I feel each time I do something like this, it's an adventure. So I love Liz. I completely get it. So I kind of changed up the topic a little bit, because in talking with Sue and talking with Love and talking with Liz and a couple other folks who said, oh, wow, I saw that you were going to be speaking, kind of thing. It just seemed like there was a lot of people had different ideas about what this meant. And I thought this summed it up. It's 2023. Why can't I find a place to live in Greensboro? I wish I could tell you that of course, this evening, over the next 45 minutes to an hour, I will reveal all and there'll be a great answer. I also will then be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, but because I will have figured out the impossible. So what I'm gonna talk about is some factors that have come together and hit and kind of played off each other, things that you'll recognize, and then maybe some things that to think about of how we can encourage some other approaches in Greensboro. So what's going on? It's pretty basic, supply and demand, basic economic principle, right? Well, yes and no. We don't have enough supply to meet the demand for housing. And this has been going on for a few years. And this is the part that is hard for people to understand. This is happening at almost every single price point of housing. So unless you have about $500,000 or and above to invest, your choices are going to be limited. So the mayor has coined the term attainable housing, that it's everything from affordable housing for folks who have a certain income, lower income level, to young people who are coming back and getting that first job at, the bank or even the city of Greensboro, or even our firemen and teachers. to trying to find what happens in the next stage of life. And so the whole supply and demand thing, it's complicated. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of things I'm going to go over this evening. I'm going to talk about history because history has a lot to do with our supply and demand. I'm going to talk about what's happening now. And I'm going to talk about some legacy issues. That's a very polite way of saying some issues that we have left over that are still embedded in our systems due to redlining. And then what are some things we can do about that? What are some things, actions and things we can reinforce and help support? Okay, let's start with demographics. This number is the percentage in 2022 of households in Greensboro that are composed of 1 or 2 people. Now think about this a little bit. Average household size coming up through the 80s and 90s was about 2.9. Didn't quite hit the 3. I've always felt for the 0.9 person, but you get the drift. More and more, we are creating households of individuals or just 2 people. That means we need more housing for households because the households aren't coming together. So, and this isn't unique to Greensboro. We are a reflection. We actually have a little bit higher because we have a higher percentage of folks over the age of 62. But this is a nationwide issue. We just aren't creating families like we used to. This is the average. So this is a pressure point that pushes on the demand for housing units. Now, even as part of this, what is that makes it even worse? Millennials versus the boomers. Maybe that should say millennials and Gen Zs versus the boomers. Here's how this plays out. Boomers like me, my husband and our son is launched, yay. So it's just the 2 of us. We live in our starter home. This Zoom talk is being brought to you from a 1,400 square foot brick ranch on the north end of High Point. That is fully paid for because we got married 35 years ago. And we only had 1 kid. And even though at times with just 1 kid, because he was 6'5", it felt like not enough room, it's fine for us. Now, I use myself as an example is because normally you would have people that have a starter home and then they would sell and get a bigger home. And then later they'd come maybe possibly downsizing or whatever. But more and more folks in my age group kept their starter homes or are looking for those starter homes again because we don't want to live in retirement communities. There's been several surveys, the AARP, American Association of Retired Persons, couple of other surveys that were out there. And so if you retire in your 60s, most of us are still pretty active, and we don't really want to go to some place where somebody tells me where I have, what I have to eat, etc. So you're seeing more and more boomers that we have picked to stay in our neighborhoods, in our communities. So that sounds lovely, right? That's great. No problem. What that means is we keep housing off the market for the other end of the spectrum. So there's less starter homes for folks to come in. So, and more millennials are having 1 or 2 person households or delaying child bearing till later in life. So these kinds of things kind of all exacerbate each other. So, and by the way, back to the retirees, just to not say that we don't want to stay here forever, but that about a few years ago, they called it staged retirements. You have this first phase where you're retired, you're physically active, you can still do stuff, you like your neighborhood, life is good. As you get older, because we are living longer, maybe that physical thing isn't working so well. So you want to be in a place where if something happens, someone can help you out. And so you see movements from retiring in place to looking for some level, maybe not assisted living, but senior apartments so that you have your similar cohort. And then last but not least, is since we're living longer, we're looking for places where people will take care of us, more of the traditional nursing home. All that means is that pushes on the supply. We're not going anywhere. So that there's a whole chunk of the housing stock that is still being occupied and not available and not turning over for younger homeowners. So blame the boomers. I'll take it. You know, we probably raised y'all wrong anyway. So I'm trying to get Love to laugh. This is, I can see her face. So this is my benchmark. There you go. So let's talk about supply problems. Look at all those things: wood, concrete, brick, all these things you need to build a house. Before the pandemic, they were in difficult supply, but pandemic and now there are supply chain issues up one side and down the other. Wood, let's just pick up wood for a second. So what exacerbates the issue with wood is, one, for some reason, we got into a trade hissy fit with Canada, and we were using Canadian lumber as to supplement American lumber. Somehow or other, that fell apart. Actually, that's coming back around and it's being fixed, but that meant a couple of years where that supply wasn't helping. We weren't able to tap into it. Now, you add into this, what are they dealing with out west? Forest fires. Big ass forest fires. Like, that's an official geography term for big. You're talking literally hundreds of thousands of homes and sources of lumber that have been destroyed over the last few years. I have two cousins that live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and my one cousin lives further north in, oh gosh, he'll kill me that I forgot. It's north of San Francisco. It's not Marin County, but Santa Rosa. There we go. And he was a retired veteran, and U.S. Navy veteran. He had a little side gig, little side hustle that helped us support with his Social Security, his veteran benefits, and he used to work for Ma Bell. In 2018, he's a widower. In 2018, a knock came on his door at 2 a.m. He had exactly 15 minutes to load up his pickup truck with his dog and his stuff and take off. And by the time he got to the end of his street, and he had some of his papers, a basket of dirty laundry, which I'll never understand, but apparently there was a lot of clothes, and dog food because Barkley had to eat. There was he turns around and it's gone. And I use this story to illustrate the housing crisis in Northern California was already terrible because of, difference with the .com industry and a few other things that were going on with Silicon Valley. Affordable housing was very, very difficult. My cousin was living in a double wide, nice trailer park that had a lot of veterans. It burned down most of his community, not just his neighborhood, but several neighborhoods together. The reason this is so fragile and frail, well, that's California. What's wrong with that? That wood supply, but the forest around it and the lumber areas around it also burned down. So where they were, as an estimate of 45,000 housing units short in 2018, add to it the 100,000 units that burned down during those fires, and then the ability to build back. That's just one. And so imagine locally we deal with hurricanes. Florida, you try to buy wood or any kind of building material after hurricanes come through. You get the idea. Two other pieces in here that impact our supply. I talked to a local builder because he had a project that I just fell in love with during his rezoning application, near downtown, infill site, cool and groovy design. But it's been a year. So I ran into him like, hey, dude, You know, you told me the zoning was the hard part. See that the seconds from the bottom bullet, electrical components. Those components are probably this by this, but they come out of China, and they aren't coming out of China. And he can't build until he knows he can get those. His bank won't let him build until he knows he can get those. So, you know, the old children's nursery rhyme for the shoe, the horse was lost, one for the nail, the shoe was lost, same sort of thing. Here's this small piece. And he's not alone, and builders are desperately looking for supply, looking for other places to make these components. And I think actually some places are gearing up in India and Vietnam to help, you know, basically become an alternate source. But here we have land, we have a willing builder, we have an infill site that will make something walkable and very desirable, but we can't get it even started because they need a component. So, and then there's labor, and there's trying to find anyone. It's very, very difficult. They'll tell you, I talk to builders all the time, and they'll tell you, you know, that we have issues with getting visas for some specialized workers. There are, you know, they steal off each other, and then the price goes up. So all these things impact the ability to produce, to meet that demand. Now, there's another part of demand. Where do people want to live? These are not Sue's list of places where people want to live. This actually comes from the National Association of Realtors that do a community preference survey every 2 years as a scientific survey across metropolitan areas across the United States. These have been the #1 component. These are the components of a desirable place to live for the past 12 years. Before we started Greensboro's comprehensive plan, we asked the National Association of Realtors if we could borrow their survey. We were just curious because they do metro areas. Greensboro wasn't quite big enough. How did Greensboro stack up? Well, it's amazing when you ask for free. They thought, well, we've never done just a city. So they used us as their pilot project in 2017. And at the end, I'll show you a link where you can find data that I've been talking about. If you're a data geek like me, this report is in there. 57% of the survey, the sample survey, said they wanted to live in compact, walkable neighborhoods that were close to work, school, play, and close to services and amenities. This is also the #1 answer. It's actually slightly higher than the national survey. And according to the National Association of Realtors, only 14% of all neighborhoods in the United States are built this way. So we're missing something here, leaving something on the table. So there's a lot of, not only is the supply an issue, but where we find stuff may not what we really want. And so that adds to this problem. Now, then there's the double-edged sword of economics. The Great Recession actually had a huge impact on supply. Back in 2000, actually Greensboro especially, we were one of the first cities in North Carolina to enter into the recession officially, and we were one of the last to recover. And in that time, so yes, things didn't get built in the time of the recession. However, on top of it, once the recession started to recover, lenders weren't that keen on lending for bigger projects. And quite frankly, builders weren't that willing to take the risk on bigger residential projects. I became the planning director in August of 2011. I will never forget, it took 3 years. One of my division managers came running into my office. He said, "You won't believe it. We actually have a subdivision plan for more than 20 houses," because that's really what we were doing. So we have this lag time in building up. So we didn't create a lot of inventory after the recession. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is our growth over the last 3 years. Remember I said Greensboro was the first to hit the recession and one of the last to leave? we had a lot of legacy to deal with. We've been a great manufacturing hub. We had textile, we had furniture, we had tobacco, and all of those things went to other places. And we didn't replace them very well. And we had, as a result of another one of those aha moments, I've been with the city for 35 years. We got the 2010 census results in 2011. And basically it said that we had 20% poverty. 20% poverty, 1 in 5 people were in poverty in Greensboro. Not Greensboro. We're the place where you can go work at Cone Mills and, and you can go find, at Lorillard, and that was just, how does that happen? It was, the report hit Forbes magazine. We were one of 3 metropolitan areas, of the top 10 metropolitan areas in America, that were 20% poverty or above. 3 were in North Carolina, us, Charlotte, and Winston. It was devastating. Now we've always been working on economic development. We've always been looking for jobs, but it really drove home the point that we needed to double down and get serious about changing how people worked, where people worked, and the types of jobs we were recruiting, that we needed a variety. Well, oops, sorry. We got really good. I don't know if you can see this, it comes down top. This is just, this is Greens booming. These are just the big ones. 1,000 at Publix, Toyota 2,100, Boom Supersonic 2,400 jobs, and they've announced more. Now the part that's interesting is these are just the big ones. I remember a time where if I could put 500 job employers up there, and we would just be so excited because we hadn't had any new ones in a very long time. These are just the big guys. There are several smaller companies, either warehousing jobs or support services to Toyota or the aircraft industry, because it's not just Boom being here, it's playing off of HondaJet and HAECO. And so we really, all of a sudden, we're the place to be. We were like, we're so jealous of Raleigh growing at 6% and Charlotte growing at 4% and Greensboro. We were just kind of humming along at a 0.5 to 1% growth rate. And we just, they were getting all these big investments. But now, look at us. So that brings another question. I'm going to show you this one a little bit sort of out of character. We do these summaries now. This is the 2nd year we finished it. So that demand creates all those jobs. Yes, they're for people here who are already here who need jobs or need better jobs and better paying jobs. But the map are potential housing units are from rezonings and annexations that we've done. This is just from 2022, but if you look in the middle, let's see if you can see that with my cursor. My cursor doesn't want to do that. Okay, yeah, if you can see it in the middle with this purple, it says in the past 2 years, there have been over just close to 11,000 potential housing units approved through our rezoning and annexation program. Now that's a drop in the bucket. We also want to show you where they are. First of all, they're all over the city. We get accused of focusing them in different places, but the parts in the east and the parts, notice a lot of them are on major thoroughfares. Now that I've told you this, you will not be able to not see it. Apartment developers, most of these are apartments or a mixture of apartments and single family homes, want to locate near an interchange like this because people need opportunities in both directions of the interchange. So you have maybe 2 couples and one works more in High Point and one's heading over to Durham. And the phenomena, we don't want to be exactly like this, but this explains why this investment is happening. Next time you drive into Raleigh or Chapel Hill and you're going through Alamance County, look to the left, look to the right, and you will just see dozens of apartment buildings, and they're 4 and 5 stories tall, and they're not just 1 or 2, there are collections of dozens of them. And that's the reason, because, well, one article is folks can't afford to live in Durham County. So they live in Alamance County in these apartments and they commute. Or they can't afford to live in Orange County where Chapel Hill is, and they have the same sort of thing. We don't want to be that, but we know that we have a lot of the new industrial developments are where I'm putting the cursor. So we want people closer to work so that they don't have to deal with the cost of transportation. So you want more people living closer to jobs. So this is what's been going. One of the more other interesting things is we are now 139 square miles as a city. When I started working here, we were like 122. And just a few years ago, we seem to be stuck at 130. So there's a double-edged sword with that too, but it means we're taking in more land for development. The developers feel comfortable in investing in the city of Greensboro. That means more jobs, more places to live. But it takes a while to go from the approval process to getting them built. Remember that electrical component I talked about? A year later, after the rezoning, he's still waiting to try and so he can get the money to go. So you get another sense, our population growth, and I'm gonna move my gallery so I can see the whole thing here. Sorry. So you see our friends in Raleigh, and Charlotte and us. And yes, Durham and Greensboro are frighteningly close. And I'll tell you, our mayor has told me she will be the mayor of the third largest city in the state of North Carolina. So we're just a little competitive here in Greensboro. But our population has been growing. We're close to, the census says we're like 299 and 700. We're 300,000. We're a city of 300,000, which is pretty amazing, but we have grown dramatically. This is just our annexation to show you that this is not a reflection. It used to be cities could annex, they call involuntary annexation. That stopped in 2011 by state law. But what this demonstrates, though, is how much people want to invest in Greensboro. That means they came to us and they said, we want to be in the city of Greensboro. We want your water and sewer, your police and fire, and we will pay your taxes and develop here. We thought we set a record in 2021. We had no idea we were going to bust it in 2022. And we are on track for exceeding this unless something dramatic happens. I don't want to jinx it, but we are still on a very fast pace. So this explains also why there's so much more demand and where those houses are going. Now, this is another issue. It's good, kind of a double-edged sword. One of the reasons why people did not build in Greensboro is this may look, we're higher average housing price than North Carolina, or excuse me, maybe we're a more affordable place to live than the country. But what that told developers, especially outside developers, was the margins for profits were very razor thin. So it was a lot of risk. So you saw smaller developments versus these indicators are huge in the Research Triangle Park area, especially. But then that becomes self-fulfilling prophecy on the price. My son and daughter-in-law built a house in Durham. That's my very brilliant daughter-in-law. After they closed, Apple announced they were coming to the Triangle. They got phone calls for a solid month asking to buy their house cash. Just cash it out, we'll buy it at an exorbitant profit. Now, that sounds great, except you have to have a house to move into, and that was part of the problem. So they're happily still in their starter house, but so there's this. So all this demand, we're growing, it's great. It's what we wanted because we were in dire straits for so long. We were pushing in this direction. But there's more to the story. We're still dealing with history, and it's not a pleasant history. In 2017, Richard Rothstein published the book, The Color of Law. He is a law professor, and it talks about the legacy of redlining in the United States. Now, I'm a planner. I love being a city planner. I have taken tons of courses in continuing education. And I had heard of redlining. It was that terrible thing with the map that we did a long time ago, but that's not legal anymore, so don't worry about it. I was, well, on my heels when I read this and reread it, and I reread it again with my staff. Talks about a system. It's not just about a map. It's more about a system of segregation and discrimination that was perpetrated in this country by government, by the banking industry, and by others. And we see vestiges of it today. And the trick is to figure out how to get, we think, oh, it was illegal, it's terrible, you just stop doing it, right? Well, so this is what the redlining map of Greensboro looked like. This is A, they are the best places to invest. B, still desirable. Yellow, definitely declining, which I found very interesting that this map, and I forget what year this is, I want to say it's like 29, maybe a little bit later, that the majority of the land is designated as either definitely declining or, wait for it, hazardous. Dun, 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 dun. And there were maps like this all across the country. And so, yes, what this said was if somebody brought you a loan and you looked it up on this map, this gave you either the best rates were given to those in blue and green, more higher rates, or more conditions for those in yellow, and maybe not at all for those in red. So that was part of it. It was money. But the legacy of redlining does a couple of other things. Sorry, go to the other side now. Up until then in this country, you could build a development and it would have both individual homes, single family homes, twin homes, maybe a fourplex or other types of smaller multifamily kind of developments. They were kind of cute. Once redlining started, there was a deliberate push to separate single family and multifamily zoning. And so even in the finance world, you could not get a loan if you had both products in your development. You could only get a single family loan for single family. And if it was in those green and blue areas, you could get better rates or more money, and it would allow you to have more money for amenities and other things like that. On top of that, so to reinforce that, there were model zoning ordinances put out there that separated the two. And there was a campaign, a PR campaign, to kind of get into the hearts and minds of people that you didn't want those undesirables in the multifamily in your neighborhood. I hear that today. Heard it Monday night in our latest Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. That decades old fear and falsehood that has been reinforced, stepped on. Well, you know, if you have multifamily, if you have an apartment, your land will go down in value. Actually not. But now everybody has, let me put a caveat in there. Everybody knows about the crappy apartment complex that's not managed well and is allowed to physically decline. We also know about the collection of crappy houses that are in a neighborhood that aren't managed well and are allowed to decline. Those are the kinds of things. But this insistent, persistent story of how terrible multifamily developments were, apartments were, and the people who lived in them has been around since the 1930s. And we still manage to, we still reinforce it, and it goes back. The GI Bill, I put one other piece in there. After World War II, we want to reward our boys, start families, repopulate this country, and give them favorable rates. They gave them favorable rates for certain single family houses. Now, the other piece of this, which was not popularly talked about, but now has been out there, about 1.5 million African-American veterans were denied GI Bill loans to receive a house. Or as they start to get them, they could only get them in certain places. So we have that. It's also a legacy of hotter neighborhoods, and I don't mean the most popular. It's been going on now for a couple years that have been university studies, and they've been reinforced with each other, that why is it that poorer neighborhoods are temperature-wise hotter? Well, it goes back to those maps that I showed you. Those areas had money for amenities like trees and parks and open space. And those other areas were not. So for example, the city of Richmond, there was a study done, and these are done by climatologists, forestry people. These are people of science that are doing this study. When they layered the maps at first, so the scientists were like, we don't get it. And then they started looking at the demographics, and then they layered the red line maps on top. And oh my goodness, the neighborhoods that were in that yellow and red, they were the hotter neighborhoods they didn't have. And that perception continues to be perpetrated. I hear a lot. Poor people don't want trees. They won't take care of them. They don't really want them. My folks that buy my houses don't want to rake leaves. Okay, then. I can hardly talk. I just talk about that. One by one, we try to debunk those myths, those falsehoods, but that's the kind of stuff. Now, the last piece in there, which is very hard for a planner to admit to, and I actually did not know this until 3 years ago, and I've been around, this year makes my 40th year in planning. So it's not because I was blind to it, I just never heard it. Planning districts, zoning districts in the 1860s through roughly 1920 were race-based. And it said in the zoning ordinance, not just the land use, but who could live there. That's really hard for me to just like, wow, my profession, we're a bunch of jerks. I can't believe that was perpetrated. The Supreme Court actually, not in a ruling that had anything to do with rights, but had to do with the business and equity of owning land, said you can't do that. You can't tell somebody who they can and cannot sell or rent their property to. So that ruling came in roughly 1918, I believe. Later, the Supreme Court has said land use and zoning can only be about the land use, not who lives there. And I'm looking at Love because she's been in the council chambers when we're talking about a rezoning. I have to get on the mic. Excuse me, council. We cannot discuss the price of the rent. We cannot talk about who may possibly manage it. We can only talk about whether it's appropriate, if it's this multifamily or not. So this legacy is still around, and we're still fighting it almost case by case. So, okay. All right, so you've talked about how we're like in this tornado of development and we have this legacy to deal with. What are some of the solutions? Well, I'm not going to give you all the solutions. We have a very capable and aggressive housing and neighborhood development department, and they handle the affordable housing programs for the city. And I believe there was a press release about a month ago that they had in 1 year approved 1,000 units of affordable housing, new affordable housing units for the city of Greensboro. So they are working, it is a council priority. So developing and building more, that is moving, people are moving that in direction. So embracing the D word. When I say density, this is what I swear goes through most people's minds. Oh my God, you're bringing that to Greensboro. This is the tenement in New York City in like, I think 1915. But when I say density, you get this, there's a freak out. Oh my gosh, there's horrible things that are going to happen. It's going to look terrible. People are crowded on top of each other. Well, that did happen in our history. And all these apartments are coming. Yay, that's great, 10,000 units, but they're spread out a little bit. This is part of what's one of the solution is. This has been talked about quite a bit over the last couple of years. A gentleman, architect, and his wife, Dan Perolic, they developed the concept of missing middle housing, which is how we used to build neighborhoods. And you'll kind of recognize if you walk around neighborhoods, things from single families are those little duplexes, the cottage court apartments, townhouses, homes, and different types all the way. There's a range. And what we did through that redlining and other parts of financing, that missing middle, whoops, I didn't even know I did that. Did you do that, Sue, to me? Anyway, go back real quick. That we made that illegal to build those. We basically said for decades, we said, you can't do that anymore. So here's some examples. This is in College Hill. This is on Walker. This is on Cedar Street. That's actually an 8-plex. There's 2 units on each part of that. This is actually a relatively new in Fisher Park that was built to fit into the neighborhood, but add more units, but not a full development. This is Southside. In fact, these are live work units. You can see 2 doors, and 2 doors over here. One goes up to the townhouse, which is like 2 stories popped on top of a shop of some type. So there's either offices, there's beauty parlors, there's Manny's Universal Cafe. There's just a lot of different places. And we had to create a new code for these in Greensboro when we built these back in the early 2000s. But think of downtown Greensboro and those apartments above the shop, which you see. So for example, above Green Bean or above any of the stores, like in the older parts, they're very desirable places to live and people really want to be there. So making these more normal. I'm not saying they go everywhere, but we should have options and choices throughout Greensboro. It takes changes to our development ordinance, which we're working on, but it takes public support because I guarantee you council hears, about how people don't like things. Now, one of the things with the public support, there's also changes at the state legislature. Cities can't just do what they want. We are enabled by the state legislature for the things we can do. There's actually enabling legislation that's been introduced to allow us to do more of these things. Lending reform, I know some really smart people that are working really hard in Washington to make that happen. They've been at it for a couple of years. But we shouldn't have lending practices still in place that were put there to keep people apart, to create segregation, to create a different world from the 1930s. It's almost 100 years. We can get rid of them. We know better, we can do better, and we make communities that are better. So, last thing, this is actually a good thing because Greensboro used to get slammed for not having a better household income. And you can see the trajectory. Those jobs we've been recruiting is starting to increase. We need to reduce the demand for affordable housing. Doesn't mean it's going to go away. We're always going to have people that need that housing affordability factor that we're going to need to provide for. But we need to find more ways and continue to recruit jobs and good paying jobs so people can afford a decent place to live as part of normal, not something that has to be supplemented. So reducing, when I said at the beginning it was complicated, it's many things. It's reducing demand, it's creating more supply, it's creating a variety of supply, and a variety of supply in places where people want to live. Easy, right? Get right on it. But we work at it one project, one policy at a time, and to cumulatively hopefully make a difference. So in summary, That's what I just did. And one of the things is more planning at a neighborhood scale to identify fit for infill, because one of the biggest things I see is people get a little freaked out on the rezoning because they didn't think anyone was going to change, and they didn't have an opportunity to talk about how things should change. And my favorite quote, I've heard this isn't really a quote, but I like to believe, planners like to believe that our president said that. Now, if you want to find anything out, this is data, report, anything, you can find it on our city's webpage, or you can contact me. And with that, I think I got my 45 minutes in. Boom.
Good job, Sue. Thank you very much. There's a comment in the chat from Sophia. Sophia, would you like to unmute and ask that question or bring up that point?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for calling me. Sue, that was great information. Great information. I've been taking copious notes, but I am the person in the organization Housing Consultants Group that does the down payment assistance in the city of Greensboro for the last 4 years. We've had great success. In the first part of my time with the city, which is starting in 2019, late 2018. But right now, because of the cost of housing in Greensboro, which is still affordable, it's still not affordable to a household making $51,000 because of the jump in price of homes within the last 12 to 18 months. The great thing is the down payment assistance programs are very helpful, and they have really ramped them up to encourage folks to use them. Unfortunately, we have sellers that find the fact that somebody's getting down payment assistance a negative, a strike against them, which is unfortunate. But $51,000 average does not make housing affordable to the average person in Greensboro.
You're right, and it's that pendulum. You know, I've worked for the city a long time, and it is. I remember a time when they were, beating down our doors because they couldn't find it. Builders couldn't find enough people to apply for their housing. So hopefully, one, the pendulum will swing a little bit, but two, affordability. But now with the interest rates, they aren't going to find a market rate person to do it either because of the 7.5% interest mortgage rate. So I think, Sophia, I appreciate you fighting the good fight on behalf of the people of Greensboro. And I think the thing that I have always found in doing work in this area is the creativity has to be persistent. And so we all have to keep looking at and figuring out what we need to do together. So thank you for bringing that up.
Mike Barr put a comment in the chat. Mike, would you like to talk about that?
Hi, Mike Barr. We're friends. You can talk to me.
Figuring out how to unmute. If anybody else has a question, this is the time you can raise your hand or put
I'm not speaking for Mike, but I think what he's saying is the fact that a lot of people have low rate mortgages. And so it makes it very difficult for them to want to sell their house, move to a smaller home. And Sue, I heard you loud and clear. I'm a household of 2. I absolutely need to move, but I have no place to go because of the interest rate. And
my son and daughter-in-law have a 2% mortgage. I just said, that's great. You'll have great equity, but man, don't get used to that.
Well, and it's unfortunate because I'm a realtor of 30 years. And I mean, I'd like to downsize, but where would I go to pay more money for less house?
Yeah, so the last time the National Association of Realtors reported to us, the last time we had people who had 2% mortgages, it took them 18 years to decide to move. When they were up around 4 or 5%, it was within 6 to 8 years. So people are sitting on those low mortgages.
And we still have to come up with supply. I mean, it's like we're not going to get that shift like we had. We're not be able to depend on that. So we're going to have to be coming up with more. I'd like to see more townhouses. I'd like to see more studio apartments. even in terms of one, so if you're familiar with Green Street at Green and Friendly, what a local developer bought the building. It's across the street from Elon Law and Seth Coker. And he just, as a project of love, because he's made quite a bit of money here on apartments, he, it's brick. It's from the 1920s. He found all these incredible things. He built, I want to say it's like 28 apartments, but they were leased up because they were leased up before he finished. And he had people trying to get into the building to see how soon they could lease it. And just that demand for the unique and the small, the demand in different locations. It's downtown. It's not just across from the law school, but it's also downtown. And, you know, we see this in other neighborhoods. Oh, I see Miss Love. She's throwing her hand up at me, so I better call on her. Yes,
No.
ma'am.
Well, no, my question is about that specifically. We are larger than some of our neighboring cities.
Mhm.
But when you look at the design of their downtown and the ability to visually see so much residential infill,
Mhm.
contemporary residential infill, I've always wondered, how did we miss the wave and only hit the back end where we did the Bellamede development, but like, how did we miss the wave of having a lot of those? Because in the time that Bellamede was being built, there were other neighboring smaller cities that had done that 12 times over. So what was the halt? Was it the fear of infill? What influenced the fact that we now visually appear behind the times in that
Well,
regard? As far
my
as the
husband works for the city of Winston, and
Mhm.
Winston has probably, and they've just announced two in the past month, two more in the past month. And they have been they have somehow figured out the historic preservation is, you know, cool. So we've had a couple. So like the Southeastern building won a national award. The conversion of that office building into apartments, which is one of the coolest places I think I've ever seen. But I think in part, you know, in landowners hold, let's see, my friends who are realtors on the call, you tell me one way or the other, they're waiting for just the right moment. And then it's gone.
Yes, yes,
Mhm.
but I
There's
mean,
also,
but they still need to work. So they gotta,
right,
what's going on right now. I mean, we're all waiting for the right moment, but I mean,
yeah.
you still gotta function and still
Well,
gotta
I
work.
think that in Love's question about, you know, how come other cities, I wish I knew the magic answer, because I'd say we have to do that. And because Winston's downtown, one of my son's friends from high school came back he got his degree in accounting from Auburn. And he is just a cutest young country fella. Just, you would grow up in High Point, North Carolina. And he lives in the innovation district of Winston. And I said, "Oh, Colton, tell me why of all, because I know this kid from baseball. You know, it's like, I never would have." And he said, "Miss S," he said, "I don't have to think about what to do. I can walk out my door and there's the ballpark. I can go to the movies. There's 5 bars there. I can work out." And he said, I just, you know, he said, "I just love it. And my car insurance rates," he's an accounting major, are way low because I don't drive." And he just kind of figured this out. And that's probably the story for half of his folks that live in his building. At the end of the day, you know, it's trying to come up with the right combination of incentives and, you know, kind of public push and other things, because I guarantee you, if you put up 200 apartments or condominiums in downtown Greensboro tomorrow, they would be filled by sunset. So this is where, if I could solve that problem, Love, I would get the Nobel Peace Prize, because I'd be really smart.
I think Liz has a question.
Yes. How do you, and this may be in your area or not, but when it comes to affordable housing, what tools do you guys use to make sure that people are comfortable within their neighborhoods? Perfect example, there's a affordable housing complex that was built. I'm in District 5, the Groomtown area.
Mhm.
And I'm not gonna lie, it's such a stigma when you say affordable housing, people think of poverty, you know, housing authority. That's what people think of. And so what do you do to ensure, you know, residents such as myself that, hey, whatever you're proposing and this is what we want to place in the neighborhood so far as affordable housing, how do you win them over with that?
I think, you know, if I, again, I'm looking to go to Stockholm. There's a couple of things we talk about. And even in the comprehensive plan, we try to paint this picture about, yeah, it's, thank you, Sophia. Is affordable housing is about teachers and firefighters and that kid that just graduated from Elon that, you know, is working in somewhere. So there's that. So we tried to reframe, you know, just start thinking about who this is. And a lot of them have been, have, you know, we start talking about, you can't talk about those people. We were laughing. It's like, you know, can we have a drinking game that anytime somebody says those people in our rezoning, we can do a shot, but that'll be bad. You know, it's just because people are afraid. And that's what I think Liz is going on. What is this going to be like? Or who's going to move in there? I don't know. And I'm going to be afraid. So we talk about a couple of things. Unfortunately, there is a piece of legislation in the General Assembly right now that in order to encourage more affordable housing, that cities would be limited. Like if you agreed to it be affordable, you wouldn't have to worry about landscaping or certain aesthetic requirements and that kind of stuff. But then it would stick out. It would, like, there was a nonprofit early in the 1990s in Greensboro. You could go through every neighborhood in Greensboro and point out which one was their house because they had a signet. They had pressed lumber for, you know, basically decorative for front porches, which didn't fit or looked. And part of it is making it normal, making it a part of the community. The second thing, which is also scary to me, is that repeating history. We know what it's like to build. Actually, HUD just came back with their new rules, no more what they call concentrations of poverty. And because, well, we can get the land cheaper here, so we can put a couple of different developments, and it becomes about a unit count. And a unit count versus thinking through the community that you have to build in order to support people who are in this income level so that they can thrive, so that they can grow and their families can grow. So my part is like not reducing the standards so it sticks out and looks different from everything else. Two, we encourage, you know, how does it blend in? If you're going to build this, what are the features that other developments have in the neighborhood that it will be a part of it? Two, we fight against people who want extra, they don't call them barriers, they want extra buffers. That just means extra separation from your neighbors. That's not how you build community. It's not how you build a neighborhood. We don't always win, but we try hard.
I think Myra's got a question.
Hi, Myra.
Hi, Sue. Thank you for all this information. This has been very informative, and I am new to this commission. So forgive me if the question I'm asking, you know, may have been addressed prior. What is there anything that the city can do or that we can do to entice investors to maybe, you know, some of these abandoned buildings close to downtown, you know, that used to be different industries, maybe possibly turning those into like studio apartments or 1-2 bedroom apartments, you know, add additional affordable housing. And it's a, you know, prime location.
we have done it with limited success. You know, we plus and minus long ago. The Wafco Mill condos / townhouses started out as affordable housing project more than 35 years ago. And it was an area that flooded, and it was an old mill, and other things were built, and it was supposed to be a demonstration show so that you could see how this could work, and then it would encourage other investment. My two pieces is that when we have these projects, we need to be persistent. I mean, if it were easy, somebody done it by now. But part of it is if we create incentive to do things, or we create some type of atmosphere, we kind of have to commit to be in it for the long haul so that it is successful. And that takes some political willpower. That's not to say that our electeds don't have that, but in my experience over years, over decades, that has happened with previous councils. So Sue P, I'm going to ask you for 2 seconds to let me go on mute, because I have a dog that's whimpering, and I just want to make sure she's just asking for a cookie and not doing anything harmful. So if you guys will give me just 2 seconds, I would
Well, now, here we are. Does anybody have a comment? And perhaps not a question, but a comment?
So I think, Adams Farm is an example where you have multiple types of housing that were put up. And we have people who are living in affordable housing next to people who are living in single family homes, in a denser community. And obviously that's a huge PUD, and it's something that is very expensive to put up in this day and age, but a smaller scale of that could easily work. And you have people who are on fixed income living in Adams Farm, and you got townhomes and condos and apartments and everything all in one community. And it's surprising, but everybody gets along. It's a great place to live, and I know that the rest of Greensboro kind of shuns it because it's a whole different world over there. But I think it's a really great place, and it's an example where you can put a lot of types of housing together, and everybody kind of gets along. Talking about Adams Farms, Sue.
Yeah, and I've been here long enough to remember when that was proposed, and it was like, at different stages of your life fit that development.
Well, we actually have people who move from the single family homes to the townhomes, and then into the condos, and then the apartments. I mean, I've actually watched that happen in Adams Farm. They like the area, they stay there.
Mm-hmm.
And they're lucky to be able to do that.
And that's what you kind of hope, that when you kind of want to create communities where people can choose, that they're communities of choice, and that people will be there at different stages of their lives because they want to, not because they can't move anywhere, they're trapped, or they can't find anything, but because there are all these other things that come together. So actually Mike is the executive director of the Greater Greensboro Board of Realtors. Did I get it in the right order?
That's close. That's close. Yeah, it's good enough.
Mike, I went and asked them about this. I was very familiar with this survey, this community preference survey, and had seen presentations about it at different conferences, and they agreed. He thought it was a great idea for us to I just was going to ask for the questions, like, could you just lend us the questions, and we would find maybe somebody at a university could do the scientific study. And Mike just supported us asking, and the next thing we know, we didn't ask them for it, but they just said, hey, this is a great idea. We want to show at this scale, at the city scale, we're a medium-sized city, what do people really want? And the biggest thing I've learned from it is that we're missing the market, that we have this higher demand for things that developers tell us all the time. And actually, when I point out the survey, they'll say, well, yes, but that takes. So we'll see. The demand is out there. But I want to thank Mike in front of everybody because Mike was very instrumental in getting that survey to us and then supporting the results so that we could talk about it with the comprehensive plan and our new comprehensive plan update, which is a national award winner, which I didn't mention, but it's kind of a big deal.
We were glad to help. Glad to help. I think it's worked out really well.
Sue, when you and I were talking last week about tonight, you mentioned, and tell me if I remembered this right, because we talked about so many things, that some of the communities that were built that had reasonably priced 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom homes were built on the edges of the city, and they didn't have services around them or stores or shopping or groceries.
Yes.
Is there any way, excuse me, to get businesses like that in your communities to grow, or is it something that should have been done before the houses were built? What can you tell us about that?
So yeah, there are developments that, you have to drive to get, especially East Greensboro, you got to drive a lot to get to a grocery store. You got to drive a fair amount. But even the newer, some of the newer developments on the edge of East Greensboro are really, they're far out. We look now, as part of the comprehensive plan, we've tried to identify areas to encourage that kind of development, like saying, this is where we'd like to see this kind of thing, looking at in those interchange areas that you see. So when we talk to developers about they want to do apartments, we'll say, hey, what if you put some land aside, or what if you partnered with somebody for some commercial? Because guess what? We can do the market analysis for here. There's no grocery store within a 3-mile radius. And I think the industry standard is a half mile. And we've tried to help push that wherever we can. So using the plan, we have tried to help. We have talked to the city council. Greensboro has not been a city that has traditionally wanted to encourage retail. The incentives have been for industrial and jobs and not the retail side of things. But we've shown some reports that in other cities across the country, that's the only way they've been able to get that kind of development. They had to break down those barriers, figure out what those financial barriers are to help get some of those, some industry there. And then I will say, and also time does happen. I don't know if you read in the paper within the last, I want to say 3 weeks, the pyramids, the old pyramid site up off at 29. I never would have predicted this, but there is a development group out of the north that's coming in. They will be building apartments on a lot of the old retail site, which will create with retail follows rooftops is the investment lingo there. So you will have people there that will support some of the retail that's already there and new retail, and they're also adding, they've done their analysis and they have discovered that we don't have enough medical facilities in the eastern part of the city. So it will be there. And it's all, you hope and pray every now and then they come together, and the private market is coming together and saying, yes, this is a gap and we're going to be there. So we're of course helping them any way we can, because we know that demand is so desperate in that part of Greensboro, so lacking, that hopefully it will trigger some other investment. The other thing in retail that I've learned from my friends is that everyone likes to be third. Nobody wants to be the
The first
pioneer.
store.
Yeah, the first store. So, but if they can show that market, and I've been in this business a very long time, these guys feel like the real deal.
So I was going to tell you, we NAR, we made their severe housing shortage list. We're number 2 in the country, and we're number 1 in North Carolina.
We're number 1.
Number 1 in North Carolina. So
Jeez.
so we really do have a severe housing shortage, and we'll keep an eye on that as it goes on. But I think everybody and their brothers trying to work. You got commercial realtors, commercial developers trying to help on the house, figure out the housing issue. Because
Yes.
Sue, you mentioned something about it's harder for builders to get loans if they have multifamily and single family housing, and I do with
Mhm.
commercial versus residential. Where'd that come from and why is it still here?
It came during the era of redlining. It was from the banking industry and also from the Federal Housing Administration in the 1930s. I couldn't tell you. One of a very successful developer I know who now teaches at Georgetown in the real estate department, and we have talked about this. His name is Chris Lineberger. He came to Greensboro to speak during our speaker series for a comprehensive plan. I said, I don't understand. It doesn't make sense. It seems to me that we are leaving money on the table as communities. If you could make more money, you're creating more value by creating a cross section of development. And he said that there's so many things that are entrenched. It's kind of like the IRS. Everyone says we need a new tax code, but who the heck wants to go through it? Because it's the devil you know versus devil you don't. And he just said he hoped that what's happening in some larger markets where there's a little higher profit, you are seeing some capital investment people, not necessarily banks per se, but capital investment that are making those types of loans, or they're combining together. So they are happening. My hope is that now that we have shown Greensboro's growth, because we've always been in this like, yes, please invest here. We are growing at 1%, but now we're not. My hope is now that we're hitting that mark that we can get that kind of attention, and we'll be happy to show them places that, whether it's old shopping centers that could be multi-use developments like the old pyramids, or we probably can all name at least 3 shopping centers we know in Greensboro that desperately need love and investment, right? And so I'm hoping that this is part of turning the tide, that showing this investment and the demand is here, that this is a good place to put their money.
I'm with you on that. Kentia, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Hi, Kentita.
Yes, can you hear me, Sue?
I sure can. What can I help you with?
Yes, my name is Kentia Smith. I really loved your presentation. It was very, very informational. I relocated to Greensboro in 2018. I'm originally from West Virginia, Beckley to be exact. And so the transition for me coming from a rural state to Greensboro has been an excellent transition, just because of the things I do have more access to. Last July, I started working with NC Realtors, and I was so excited because I keep hearing people throw around NAR. But I started working with NC Realtors Housing Foundation. I'm their director. And so one thing I keep always hearing is affordable housing. And Sonia Joyner, who's on our board, she works with North Carolina Housing Finance Agency. She has actually started to say, we need to change from that term, because unfortunately, it does get a negative connotation. And Ms. Sophia is right. When we say affordable housing, it's working professionals. So I know that the new term that she's saying, NC Housing Finance is wanting to do is asset building housing, meaning that this housing is going to help your family create wealth and build assets. But my question is, so the NC Realtors Housing Foundation, we have an amazing board. It's very interesting to come from working with people, homeless, youth age out of foster care, to a Realtors Association, and just seeing their drive and passion for recognizing the lack of housing, or the ability for clients who really need the housing to afford it. So the NC Realtors Housing Foundation, we have a campaign. We've already pledged almost $250,000 to doing some form of revitalization, home building, projects in all 100 counties. It's 100 homes in 100 counties. We've already started with Rutherford. We've started with New Handover, Clay, Cherokee. And so my question is 2-part. For a nonprofit that is looking to get funding to help with things like this, in addition to having, the Realtor Association is very strong in our state. I believe we're up to 56,000. So in addition to utilizing that, when we go into these local cities and meet with their public officials, what would be some of the things we should ask about when we're looking for potential funding to help us fund the projects?
So there's a couple of things on my advice. So in Greensboro, we have housing bonds and we have the Nest Bomb Fund, which is roughly a penny of our tax rate. So go see my friends over the Housing and Neighborhood Development Department. Michelle Kennedy is the department head. So we have some cash. But if you're going into other places, so sometimes it's just really hard. Even though the economy was doing better, having cash becomes difficult. So start thinking through in-kind things. For example, the water and sewer lines, the laterals that go to the house, right? That's expensive. I mean, that's an expense, but it's not that much of an expense that the city might be able to do, or streets or sidewalks. Think through the things that cities provide that, maybe if you were doing a full development, a developer would be required to do it, but maybe in terms of as partnership is, we've got this kind of investment, city, you can bring us this much in kind of infrastructure, whether it's water, sewer, stuff like that, which, or if they have a Parks and Rec department, our Parks and Rec department many years ago had its own greenhouse. We used to provide trees, and during one recession that was sold off, but some cities still have that. So there's I look to see if they have any kind of bond or funding program, but I also look for what are those conversations of what are those kind of things that cities can do that do normally that can help defray some of the costs. And that's my only thought for 7:30 at night. Is that helpful at all?
Yes, it's very helpful. And another thing I noticed that's going to be very impactful is critical home repairs. A lot of people, especially in their rural communities, they don't want to move out of their homes. Even though the home has severe repairs, they don't want to leave their home. And so that's the big thing too, is maybe not being able to get new housing built, but going in and repairing critical home repairs. But yes, this was a wonderful presentation, and I'll definitely take into account what you said and bring that back to our directors too.
Yeah, roofs,
Okay, I've got
roofs and plumbing.
I have 7:24. We have time for one last question, and Britt's got her hand up. So
Hi, Britt.
Greetings, how are you?
I'm fine. What can I do for you?
So I kind of want to back behind Kentia, and I do want to understand more of what do I take to, because I'm a veteran and I'm a well-off veteran and I want to make change. I want to help others get into an asset position. And so I want to understand, if I'm going to the federal government that has money, what do I say to them that is going to encourage them to give my business money? I'm not nonprofit, I'm for profit, but what am I going to say to them? Because I'm a triple threat. I'm a minority, service disabled, veteran owned small business. So they're going to
give a unicorn, or
it does. It does. And so I'm going to bring that back to my city. I'm from Greensboro. I'm a Greensboro native. And I mean, it doesn't matter what side of town, like she kind of said about the houses that need help, but also that we have working class homeless people. People are working and they're home. I want to change that. So what do I present? And this is going to say, because Sue, I have an appointment next week in Potomac, Maryland with the government. So I'll have the opportunity to propose to them what I want to do for my city, and how do I get them to understand when they give me $5 million that Sue Schwartz is going to help me to develop my...
Well, you are going to get me to Stockholm, aren't you?
Yes, ma'am.
So, couple of things. So this is also from being a grant evaluator over the years. People, the government especially, like to fund things that are already successful. So one, being able to tell your story about what you've already been able to do, whether it's just counseling or creating a board or whatever, but what are the things, because nobody wants to fund somebody from ground zero, because they want to see a return on their investment, just like anybody else. Oh, did I lose you, Britt? Are you back?
No, I'm here.
I'm here. Okay. Sorry, you switched on. You now became Jan Brady on my screen. So that's one. Have your story pretty. This is just like your small business and putting your loan. Have your story clean, clear. What do you want to accomplish? If who's with you? How much is it going to cost? How much have you already raised? Because nobody, government doesn't like to come in flat either. I know it sounds weird, but or promises of raise or other places that you are talking to. So when you're going to go talk to Potomac, you are going to be telling them the story of what is it you want to do? What is the need you see that you want to do? What do you want to do to solve it? Who's with you? What's your approach? Full story, and how they are going to help you be successful. For not you be successful for Britt, but being successful for Potomac.
Correct.
So, does that make
Oh,
sense?
yeah, so I guess that's what I'm like, when it comes to, because I'm doing it for the city, and like you said, I'm not doing it for me, and how is it going to make the federal government successful? But they're only going to give me the money if they know that it's going to make them successful based
Right.
on municipal position. So from the horse's mouth, what
Nay,
is
Winnie.
no, just saying, what is it that you know for sure that I can bring to what can the city of Greensboro do for Potomac, Maryland, that they should encourage me to help the city of Greensboro?
Huh.
I don't know there's an answer to that
Yeah,
question.
that's a pretty circuitous question. The end of the day, let's see if I can put it this way, Britt. The end of the day, I want to know what you want to do, how you're going to do it, what do you need from me, and when am I going to see results?
Okay.
Whether it's the city of Potomac, the city of Greensboro, Britt Jackson, Sue Schwartz. Those are the fundamental questions in grant writing. What do you want? Why do you want? What are you going to do? Why are you going to do it? What's the need? What need are you fulfilling?
Okay.
How long is it going to take?
I guess I'm trying to get an understanding as to, okay, if I can say that if I'm gonna use these funds to build what I had termed workforce housing, which I think Thea said asset housing. And
how many units? How are you going to outreach? Who's going to build them? Those are the kinds of things that a federal government's going to want to know.
Right.
Are you
Okay.
if I give you the money, is it going to sit there for 6 months while you figure all this out, or are you ready to go?
Okay.
Okay, we have to call it an evening. Sue's been
Thank you so
Sue's put in a full day here of work plus this, and I'm quite sure she is a little exhausted. I really appreciate everybody showing up tonight. If you did not register, but you do want a copy of Sue's PowerPoint, which she's going to send me tomorrow, if you want a copy of it, make sure your email address is in the chat so Liz can get it. And we will make sure you get a PDF of the PowerPoint. So Sue, thank you again. Thank you for everybody else. And just Joyce, if you're there, I haven't seen you in ages. I'm glad you're here and I wanted to say hi.
I am here and I hadn't seen you in ages.
Yeah,
I saw you at the event that we did, or that you all did at Barber Park last month, the
Right.
report on the women of Greensboro.
yeah, that's one of the things I love about Greensboro is that you can show up here and find people that you knew from then and say hi again. So everybody have a wonderful evening. Sue, thank you very much again. Liz, thank you for finally getting us together.
Hey, Liz.
And we will talk to you next time.